Boo!
Well, we can certainly start getting ready for mine.
Sounds good to me.
Let me get the music going. Mine is a little bit more twisted, I guess you could say. When I read this, I thought, this is crazy. I've got to share this story tonight for the Halloween live stream, so I'll go ahead and get into it. It's called Best Friend. I had this friend when I was growing up that I was pretty close with. I'll call him Carl for the purpose of this story. I recall meeting him when we were in the first grade. I swear I even remember what the schoolroom we met in looked like and such. Carl and I became fast friends mostly because we were unlike most other boys in school. Particularly, we both liked to play with boys' and girls' toys for some reason. It was hard to find boys or girls who liked this when we were younger, so it was just a natural, it seemed, that him and I would be good friends. Throughout the years growing up, Carl and I did just about everything together. He would always come to my birthday party as the first person to come and the last person to leave. My parents would give him a ride whenever we had one of the birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. We were a very close two-person friendship. And even when we played things like hide and seek with other kids, we didn't connect with other children the same way we did with each other. As we got around 13 years old, things began to change a little bit. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Boys going through puberty, and they began liking girls more than they do each other. That's not what was going on there, and that's not what I'm talking about. Yeah, we talked about girls and absolutely had an interest in them, but there were much deeper and stranger things that were changing with Carl. He was going through some odd things. We both started watching horror television and horror movies when we were really young. Our parents wouldn't have been happy about it if they would have known, so we kept it a secret. Often we would spend the night at his house in his bedroom and wait for his parents to go to sleep. Since it was a sleepover, we were always allowed to stay up pretty late. Oh, and I don't want you to think that Carl's later behavior had anything to do with watching horror movies. I truly don't believe horror movies, comics, TV shows, video games, and stuff of that nature make people behave in a certain way. I needed to get that out there before I continue with this story. The first thing that I noticed with Carl is that he would start playing little practical jokes on his siblings. Just some minor things, but he always got a big kick out of it when one of them would fall for one of his tricks. He seemed to get a real rush out of their reaction or something, and he started to up the ante as this went on. Playing little innocent things at first on his family developed into playing jokes on his classmates as well, but it was never like a joke you play on someone and afterward you have a good laugh about it together. Carl was not just about playing jokes, he was into doing it without getting caught. He never wanted anyone to know that he was indeed behind the joke. Here are just a few things I remember him doing. In school, we used to have these desks that you would lift the lid up on the desk when we were younger. It had a little compartment inside. He had gotten a garter snake and he would place it in the desk of other students. He actually got to school very early, so he'd be the first one in the classroom, so he could leave before anyone knew. The student had opened his desk and began yelling and screaming, causing everybody in the classroom to panic. Carl would also react in the same manner as the student did. He did this to draw attention away from himself, and it worked. No one ever suspected him or anything he had ever done to get in trouble. You name it, he started doing it. Tax on the teacher's chair, stealing her attendance book. He once rubbed the inside of every pair of his older brother's underwear with icy hot before letting them dry and putting them back into his drawer. Just a lot of odd things like that. I thought that had reached its apex, though, when in between classes once in a crowded staircase, he tripped a kid who fell down the stairs and broke his arm. This was in high school, and the kid was a jock who pretty much so lost his ability to play football after that. But it was when Carl was 16 that things started to take a turn that I honestly didn't see coming. We were still old enough to go trick-or-treating in my area. Personally, I had stopped going when I was 12. I just felt weird walking around begging for candy at that age. Carl had stopped too, but it wasn't unusual to see teenagers up to 18 still going around asking for candy. But by age 16, Carl wanted to go trick-or-treating again. He insisted that I get a costume and that I go with him. I really didn't want to. I mean, for one thing, I knew the guy. If he had suddenly wanted to do something again that he hadn't done for years, he probably had a reason for it, and that reason was most likely not going to be a good one. Still, the guy was my friend, so I got myself a costume. He insisted that it was a costume that was realistic and nobody'd be able to tell who you were if you wore it. I went as Freddy Krueger and bought myself a high-end rubber mask. Carl's costume was even better. He actually wore boots with lifts in them to make himself look taller. He wore like a Michael Myers-looking outfit, but with some sort of welder's mask that covered his whole head. It was a weird costume, but it definitely hid who he was very well. I was wondering why Carl wanted to wear such an odd costume. When he told me why, I literally shivered. A chill went down my spine. Carl had heard about the case of the guy who ended his life's son with the poison pixie stick. I mean, back then we all believed that people put things into candy and that it was always a smart thing to check your kid's candy before them eating it. But other than that one case, you really never heard of anything on the news about it. You never heard about the candy with the blade in it or anything like that, even though we had heard those myths in the past. But as far as in our area or even on the national news, you didn't really hear of things like that. Carl wanted to change that. He had taken Tootsie Rolls and inserted thin pins into them longwise. He had then wrapped them back up. He was planning on putting them into a bucket and giving them out to kids while we were out trick-or-treating. I told Carl that was a crazy idea and some kid could get killed. His excuse was that no parent lets their children eat Halloween candy without checking it first. Not only was the wrapper twisted back on in a terrible fashion, the head of the pin was obviously sticking out of the end of the Tootsie Roll. I really didn't understand the point of this if he was going to make it obvious. And he simply said he wanted to scare the parents and the kids into thinking someone simply wanted to hurt them. But he was sure no one would actually get hurt. It is the most insane thing I'd ever heard a person tell me in my entire life. I mean, not only was the premise of his plan sickening beyond measure, it wasn't foolproof either. All it took was one person not checking one piece of candy, and that could make Carl a murderer. The two of us argued about it, and he was pretty angry at me for not wanting to go along with it. But it was only when I told him that if he did it, I would have to reveal him as the person who had done it. So he finally decided not to do it. We just decided to remain in and watch movies that night. A lot of you may be wondering why I didn't just leave. Honestly, I felt that if I did, Carl would go and do the plan on his own. I just couldn't take the chance that he would risk any child's life like that. Others may be wondering why I didn't just call the police. Well, he backed off and wasn't going to do it. Even though he had done some pretty amazingly bad things in recent years, I still believed him when he told me he wouldn't do it. The strangest thing that Carl never seemed to have any resentment towards me. If I didn't agree with him on something, he continued to treat me exactly the same as he did before anything would happen. I had a hard time seeing him the same way, though. And although we continued to hang out until we graduated high school, I didn't keep in touch with him after that because we went away for college. I have absolutely no idea what has ever happened to him since then. I just hope he never does anything this bad in real life to anyone.
Wow. That is messed up.
Is that not like the makings of a serial killer?
Yeah, definitely. Like, as soon as it started with, like, the weird pranks and stuff that he was doing, I was like, oh boy, this guy's gotta be the next, Night Stalker.
Yeah, coming off of the Golden State episode that we did, I was like, man, this guy's like building up to be something like that. This is insane.
And we don't know because he lost contact with him what he ended up becoming.
What did you think about the icy hot and the underwear?
That was such a strange thing. It also seems like something he got from a movie because I'm pretty sure he did that in some movie.
I don't know, dude.
I think it might have been one of the Revenge of the Nerds or something.
Something. When I read the story, though, I was truly creeped out.
Yeah, the whole time it was just like gross and weird feeling of beginnings of a monster. And then that night with the candy, they would have sealed the deal had he killed somebody with that.
Do you think that he really thought that nobody would get hurt from it, or he wanted to hurt somebody maybe?
I think he did. I think he gave them an out, and he probably saw it as like if they fell for it, then they deserved it. And so I think it was kind of like a superiority thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like he wanted to get the attention. Like, even though, like, people are weird like that, right? You hear about, like, people that do crazy things like this. They want the attention, even though it may not be connected with them. They still want that fame for whatever reason.
Yeah, wow.
The Tootsie Roll. So I was trying to think of when they said pin, I was trying to think of what exactly he was putting in the Tootsie Roll.
Oh, it's like a push pin or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly what I was thinking. I don't know if I have any sitting around here. Yeah, but yeah, like a push pin you'd put in there. Yeah. He said it was like real obvious hanging out through the outside of it.
I actually think I might have one. Like a needle type that you would use for like sewing, maybe. Not quite a sewing needle, but like this one here. A little head on top.
Exactly what I was going to pull out. I've hung up some stuff in here in the studio because of with them. Yeah. That's a crazy thing to put in a Tootsie Roll, dude.
Monstrous idea.
16 years old when he was doing this. I can't imagine how this would escalate.
Oh, yeah, he would definitely become a serial killer.
Is this a scary story?
Yeah, it's a scary story.
Do you kind of like understand what well, first of all, you're lucky that you had me as a friend and you thought you had it bad. I never did anything like that growing up. But second of all, did you really understand what he was saying? Like, hey, it's my friend. Like,
yeah.
Is that a weird situation to be in, right? I mean,
on the one hand, it makes you want to have a Tootsie Roll real bad. But on the other hand, I want to check it for a pin next time I get one.
Viv Games is terrified by this, I think.
I mean, it's a terrible idea. It's like a terrifying idea. It's like, wow.
How would you have reacted? I don't know if you ever had a friend like this. I guess I've had one this extreme.
No, like I didn't know how would you react in that situation. You know,
would you call the cops, as he mentioned?
I mean, yeah, probably. I'd probably have to say something because that's like something a crazy person to do. Although I do agree that he probably made a good decision to stay there.
So you supported that part?
Yeah, because like there's a good chance he would have just gone out on his own.
Yeah.
Especially with that costume that he picked to clearly be unidentifiable. He's taller than he is. He's got a completely blacked out welder's mask thing on.
You picked up on all that.
Yeah.
This story to me was, creepy. Like a creepy Halloween story to me. Could have been a lot worse, obviously.
Yeah.
If you could say one thing to Carl today, what would it be?
Stop putting stuff in the candy. What the hell?
Yeah, what's wrong with you, dude? That's a crazy thing to even think about.
Yeah. Wow, that was creepy.
Growing up, were you big into checking the candy, or parents big into that?
We stopped trick-or-treating a long, long time ago. I think I was 7.
So you never really trick-or-treated?
And we only went to, like, people we knew, like our cousins.
Yeah, makes me think about it, maybe checking the candy a little bit closer, although I have done that.
I definitely will suggest it to, my brother and for his kids and stuff like that.
Yeah. It sounds like something a little bit sillier, like, oh, you could tell somebody, but like sometimes the candy's been handled and stuff. It's kind of like already kind of open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell. Like, I hadn't heard of this pixie stick thing, dust thing, whatever they were talking about either, but
I think I have heard of it.
So Viv Games says he checked some of the nephew's candy, ate some just in case.
Yeah.
You got to prove it out, right?
Yeah.
So you had heard of this though? This pixie thing?
I have heard of it. I've heard a lot of the different, candy stories. Like he even mentioned there are other candy stories, but this was the only one that was like proven true.
Seemed like Carl was pretty into it.
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah, that was nuts.
I don't want to say it's a good story because it's certainly not a good story, but it's a creepy Halloween story to say the least.
Yeah, it hit the right notes for a Halloween story.
We've all had that one friend that was a little wild, but I can't say I've ever had one that had ever talked about doing that.
No, I think our wildest friend just would tear sometime.
Oh, no one else knows what you're talking about when we do things like that, but I certainly do. There's a big difference between crying and tearing.
Yeah, definitely difference.
It's one thing I've learned over the years. There's a big difference. Yeah. Viv Games will end it with his thing. Definitely reminds him to check the candy.
I mean, it's a good move.
Jeff Townsend Media. CG, good night.
And the question is, do I stay here? Will you be back? Are you gonna come back? Will you be back? Are you coming back?